What if I told you that the most powerful people in the world are the ones you never notice? They move quietly, without noise, without validation, yet their presence alters everything around them. You'll never find them chasing attention or proving who they are, because they've already seen what happens to those who do. There's a strange kind of peace in disappearing, not as escape, but as control. And what if that silence, that refusal to be seen, is the very reason they're feared the most? Because what people can't read, they can't predict. And what they can't predict, they can't control. Most people live addicted to visibility. They believe that if no one sees them, they don't exist. They shout their opinions, display their faces, decorate their lives for strangers, terrified of being forgotten. But then, there are the ones who vanish, not because they are weak, but because they've seen enough to understand what exposure really costs. You'll find them in silence, observing, calculating, detached from the chaos everyone else calls connection. They speak little, but when they do, it's never small talk. They don't post, they don't explain, and yet their absence demands more attention than most people's presence ever could. Because we live in a time where mystery feels dangerous. To not show yourself is to reject the game everyone else is playing, and that threatens those who depend on being seen. They'll call you distant, arrogant, even strange. But what they're really saying is, I can't read you. And that makes me uncomfortable. Have you noticed how uncomfortable people get when someone doesn't respond right away? How silence in a room feels heavier than noise, as if something invisible just shifted the power dynamic. It's strange, isn't it? In a world where everyone's talking, the one who doesn't suddenly becomes the most intimidating presence in the room. Because silence forces people to face themselves, and most can't handle what they see when the noise disappears. You've seen it happen when you stop oversharing, when you stop trying to be understood, when you stop chasing conversations that drain you. People start to pull away. They wonder if you've changed, if something's wrong, or worse, if you've seen through them. And maybe you have. Maybe you've realized that peace doesn't come from being understood. It comes from no longer needing to explain yourself. Maybe you've started to notice how people treat silence like an insult, as if your calmness exposes their desperation to be noticed. You don't even have to say anything. Just your composure makes them nervous, because in your stillness, they start to see their own instability. In your detachment, they sense everything they secretly wish they could be. And that's why they talk louder when you grow quieter. Why they joke, interrupt, or try to pull you back into the noise. There's a moment that no one talks about. The moment when you realize that disappearing has made you untouchable, but also invisible. At first, the silence feels like freedom. No expectations, no noise, no endless pretending. But as days pass, you start noticing something else. The world doesn't reach for what it can't see. People stop asking where you've been. They stop checking in. They simply adjust to your absence, as if you were never really part of the noise to begin with. And that's when the peace begins to blur with something colder. Detachment. Not because you want to leave, but because you no longer know how to return. You watch people chase meaning in circles, their lives powered by validation and noise, and for a while, you almost envy their blindness, because ignorance has its comfort. But once you've tasted the silence, it's impossible to go back. You become the outsider, not bitter, not broken, just distant. You speak less, listen more, and feel the space between words widen like a void that only you can hear. And yet, even in that void, there's a strange sense of control. You start realizing that being unseen doesn't mean being powerless. It means operating in a world that no longer knows how to read you. But the real question isn't how you disappeared. It's why you felt the need to. People begin to sense a shift in you. Not something you said or did, but something in your energy. A calm certainty that doesn't beg to be noticed. It unsettles them, because in a time where everyone is screaming to be seen, your silence feels like defiance. They start treating you differently, speaking more carefully, choosing words that feel rehearsed. They'll try to impress you or provoke you just to get a reaction. And when you don't give them one, they start to question themselves. They'll whisper about you, call you distant, arrogant, unpredictable. But beneath those words lies curiosity, because they can't figure you out, and that drives them insane. You notice the shift in their eyes, how they start measuring themselves when they're near you. You see the tension in their laughter, the subtle performance in their confidence. And for the first time, you see the world not as it appears, but as it truly is. Fragile, frantic, built on the fear of invisibility. While they perform for attention, you observe in silence. You see their masks, their motives, their quiet desperation to matter. And the more you see, the less you need to speak. Because once you understand how transparent the world becomes to the unseen, you realize that silence was never weakness. It was evolution, and evolution never explains itself. At some point, the silence stops feeling like a choice. It becomes a way of existing. You start noticing that the noise around you no longer reaches you the same way. You hear people speak, but their words don't sink in. You see the chaos, the endless opinions, the subtle begging for validation, and it all feels distant, like you're watching it from another dimension. You no longer crave to be understood. You no longer feel that pull to prove your worth to anyone. Your focus turns inward, toward your own rhythm, your own truth. It's not arrogance, it's clarity. You begin to see that most of the things that once controlled you, attention, envy, approval, were never real in the first place. They were illusions built by noise, by people who can't stand to be alone with themselves. Now, you operate differently. Your emotions are quieter but sharper. Your patience expands. You start reacting less and observing more. Even when people try to provoke you, your silence becomes their mirror, and they're forced to confront the emptiness of their own noise. And that's when something powerful happens. You stop being easy to manipulate, because you've built a private sanctuary inside yourself, a silence that protects rather than isolates, a peace that doesn't need to be seen to exist. You've become what people secretly wish they could be, untouchable. Not because you're stronger, but because you've finally learned to guard your peace like it's sacred. And once you reach that point, something strange happens. You stop craving to be understood. You stop needing people to see your worth, your pain, or your potential. Because now, you finally understand that peace isn't found in being seen. It's found in being undisturbed. The world will still try to pull you back in. They'll wonder why you've changed, why you don't react anymore, why you no longer chase their validation. But they'll never realize you didn't disappear to prove a point. You disappeared because you outgrew the noise. You'll notice it in the smallest moments. Walking alone feels lighter. Silence feels sacred. And your thoughts no longer feel like enemies. You've stopped explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. And that quiet confidence, it unsettles them, because they've built their lives on being seen, while you've built yours on being free. You start to see how addicted everyone is to attention, how their worth depends on being visible, being heard, being noticed. But you've broken that spell. You've realized that attention isn't oxygen, it's smoke. And the moment you stop inhaling it, you finally start to breathe. There's a power in restraint that most people will never know. The ability to hold your truth without performing it, to know your worth without displaying it, to walk away, not out of anger, but out of understanding. You no longer exist to be consumed. You exist to observe. And eventually, you realize the silence you once feared has become your strongest armor. What once felt like loneliness now feels like clarity. You start hearing things you never could before. The sound of your own thoughts, your instincts, your truth. Because when the noise of the world fades, what's left isn't emptiness, it's you. That's when peace turns into power. Not the kind of power that dominates others, but the kind that can't be taken away. It's a quiet authority, one that doesn't need to be proven, one that people feel without you saying a word. You become the calm presence that unsettles chaos, the still water that reflects everyone's true face. And as you move through the world, something strange happens. People start noticing you more because you don't try to be noticed. They lean in, trying to decode you, but they can't. Because you've learned the greatest secret of all. Visibility is a trap, but awareness is freedom. You no longer chase moments. You choose them. You no longer speak to be understood. You speak only when it's worth the silence. And in that restraint lies mastery. Because peace isn't found in isolation. It's found in self-possession, in knowing that you don't need to prove, display, or defend who you are. There comes a moment, after all the noise, the proving, the pretending, when you realize you were never meant to be understood by everyone. You were meant to understand yourself. That's when everything slows down. The chaos of attention, the addiction to being seen, the desperate hunger for validation, it all dissolves, and what remains is peace. Not the fragile kind that depends on the world behaving a certain way, but the unshakable kind that lives beneath your skin. Steady, quiet, unbothered. You begin to see life differently. You stop chasing moments that drain you. You stop performing for people who never truly looked at you. You stop fighting battles that exist only in other people's minds. And somewhere in that stillness, you rediscover yourself. The part that was buried under noise, comparison, and doubt. Disappearing was never an act of weakness. It was transformation, a return to your essence, to the version of you that existed before the world told you who to be. There's a rare, sacred power in walking through the world unseen but never lost. To carry light without needing to display it. To know your worth so deeply that even silence feels full, complete. And as the world continues to scream for attention, you'll smile, not out of arrogance, but peace. Because you've discovered what most never will. The true strength isn't in being known, but in being whole, even when no one's watching. That is the peace of not showing yourself.